Yeah, so thanks for joining us today, Kit. And we're super excited to hear about your residency in Japan. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can just show your slides, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. And
thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, all of you. And I'm really excited to share this information and experience. And just a kind of background, in 2019, I took advantage of this wonderful opportunity to travel to Japan to learn traditional water-based woodblock printmaking called mokuhanga in Japan. I was there October 26th to December 2nd, 2019. So just before the pandemic hit. So I was really lucky to get there. And the residency was in a small town called Fujikawaguchiko. And as you can see, this is a lake in walking distance from the residency, and there's Fuji in all its glory. So that was really special. So before I launch into more of the experience and what led to it and stuff like that, I'd like to show you a short segment of a video. If I can get my slide to advance. Why is it beeping? Wonder if I click. There we go. Okay. So I'd like you to just pay attention. It's just going to be a short 4 minutes, and I'd like you to pay attention to the process, the materials, and the tools. So this is master printer Keiji Shinohara. This video is from the Smithsonian, their Asian Art Museum, and it's wonderful. I have a link to it at the end. So.
Hey, Kit, we can't hear the audio.
There isn't any yet? I mean, it's very quiet, so let me know when it starts. You'll hear it, and then he'll do a couple of comments over top of it.
Okay, there is one you share in the lower left-hand corner of the share box, a box to share computer audio.
Oh, should I go back out of that?
Yeah, if you unshare and then reshare and check that box as you reshare.
Oh, okay, so
share, and then in the lower left.
After I click my window.
Yep, and then there's a little box to share computer audio. Yep.
I forgot. Yep. Okay, and then I'm just gonna go back from here. I'm gonna go here. Oops. All right, sorry about that. Now you should be able to hear some quiet audio in the beginning.
I studied about 10 years mastering printing techniques. It's very difficult. Water is very important. Paper have to be moist to get the color from the blocks. You have to keep exactly same moisture throughout process. Each time I water the blocks so color not be drying. Each block had a specific area to print. Usually this line block is always fast because this is key to build colors. You need 14 blocks, 15 color to finish whole project. You're gonna print with lighter color first, and then you're gonna go to dark.
Okay. So that is where I'm going to stop that. And at the end, if there's time, if people want to see that again after having heard my presentation, then I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of history of this technique. And I'm not qualified to give you an in-depth history. It's just a little bit. So most people, when they think of Japanese woodblock prints, do think of the ukiyo-e prints from the Edo period, which was 1603 to 1868, before Japan opened up to the West. So this is from Hokusai. You may be familiar with the big wave and the little boats. Many people are familiar with that print, and Mount Fuji's kind of in the background under the waves. This is also by him, Fuji in Clear Weather, from the series 36 Views of Mount Fuji, the Cleveland Museum. So the wealthy merchant class of the Edo period developed this printmaking form into a very sophisticated art form. And just advance. Here's another print. So at the height of its development in the 18th and early 19th centuries, the prints were created for a commercial market. So that was a business, and the production was collaborative, including the artist, the publisher, the carver, and a printer. So master printers could make as many as, say, 200 prints a day. And these were sold as sort of travel literature. They were not really seen as valuable. They were more like travel literature or postcards. And oftentimes they'd be, in addition to scenes, landscapes, and scenes of everyday life, which is kind of, ukiyo means the floating world. And that kind of, it's a Buddhist term that they kind of changed to mean kind of like everyday life, fleeting everyday life. And then sometimes they would make, many times, prints of kabuki actors. And I guess kabuki theater was also one of the arts that the merchant class developed, because when Japan was very stratified at that time, and they didn't have access to the so-called high arts, which I'm not really familiar. I think there was other forms of painting. I'm not really familiar with the history of that, but that this was specifically a merchant class development. So, so these print shops and this method, which was demonstrated by that master printer, sort of declined after Japan opened up to the West. But then those prints started to float into the Western world and inspire a lot of artists in Europe because of their use of color and unique ways of composition. So then there was another movement in the early 20th century called the Mingei or People's Crafts Movement. It was sort of a revival of the folk crafts of Japan, including pottery, textile arts, and woodblock printmaking. And so these were celebrated, these traditional arts. And in this case, the woodblock, in this time, the woodblock printing became done by the artist. The whole process was done by the artist, from design to carving to printing. So this is an example of one of those more modern prints. Kane Yamamoto. So this is before 1946. And again, this movement was called the creative print, or Sosaku Hanga, or creative print.
Did something happen in 1946? You said it's before
Oh,
1946?
this is before. Well, then the war and all that.
Oh,
You know,
sure.
the war
Sure,
was very
sure.
disruptive for
Of course.
everyone, including
Yeah.
artists. But there was an artist whose name was Yoshida. That was his, family name. And he traveled to the West. And we saw a show of his when I was in Japan. The group went to see a show in the area. Incredible printmaker, but he came to the West and did a bunch of prints of, like, the Alps, the mountains in the West. And then he came to America. That is another, I think he had printers who worked for him, but he did all these paintings. And then, he did the work that traditionally the publisher would have said, make this like that and do this here. And so he did that part, and then he employed printers, I'm pretty sure. But anyway.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So then the Western method, just to kind of compare. So Western, you often hear it called woodcut. It's got oil-based inks, and usually uses a mechanical press. And then the Western paper, which is very different from Japanese paper, is usually made from cotton, shorter fibers. So the ink will sit on the surface of the paper. This is an example of, I really like this artist. His name was Gustav Baumann. He was from Germany or Switzerland, I think one of the two. And he came to America and lived in the Southwest for a very long time and did many prints of that landscape and the people and the native peoples down there. So this would have been done with oil-based inks.
I love the colors.
Yeah, he just could
Yeah.
do that light in the South. He was very good with light and dark.
I love that one too. I was looking at the proportion.
Yeah.
Sky to everything else.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah. And he would do this little border. You can kind of see a little tiny. So he cut that out of a block and printed that. And then he had his little, which is kind of a reference to Asian art when they put their chop mark on.
Sure.
You'll see that in paintings. So that's kind of a reference.
And then is his signature there? Is that?
Yeah, there it
something you
is.
think he
Yeah.
signed, or was that also?
Say again?
Was that also part of did he print that, or did he actually sign that?
No. In an edition, normally what's done is you do it in pencil. You sign the title. He's got an edition, I'm not sure, 106, if that means the number of prints, or that this was number 106.
106.
And then Gustav Baumann, that would have been signed in pencil, and that looks like probably a little woodblock stamp or something.
And were the Western methods also that multi-layer, 15 different prints building on the color?
Yeah, and you'll see usually the ink is applied with a roller. Maybe people do that, a roller. And this is true for lino cut as well. A roller, and then a press, like a flat bed press that has a giant roller to apply pressure. And I guess part of that, like the paper's dry, the oil takes more pressure to get it onto the paper.
Got it.
But again, nowadays you can do water-based inks. They do have those nowadays, but back then they didn't. So then, sorry. Anyone
Sorry.
else?
yeah. When you start, so you mentioned Western is oil-based. The Japanese is
Water-based.
water-based. Okay,
Yep.
so the guy in the video, that's water-based?
That's water-based. Yep. So, Japanese methods, so water-based pigments. In the residency, we used just watercolor paints, Holbein, which is a Japanese brand. They gave us a set of transparent watercolor and a set of gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. That'll sit on top. It'll, you won't be able to see through it as well. So water-based pigments, a handheld tool called a Baron, which you saw him rubbing on the back of the print. And then the paper, again, Japan has a really deep, long tradition of paper making, even though paper did come from China originally. They developed that to, again, centuries old process, and they used a plant called the mulberry. Some people in the West call it rice paper, but that's not really accurate because it's not made from rice. It's made from the fibers of the mulberry plant, a specific species of that. So let's see, where am I here? Japanese method, yeah. And they also had an ingenious system of registration called the Kento system. You may have seen when he put the paper on, and I'll show you later. But it's they're carved marks with a chisel in every block. So every color layer will have had that mark transferred from the original, like cartoon or tracing. And it'll have that mark. There's a right angle in the lower right, and then there's a straight edge, and they drop the paper into that. So every print is perfectly aligned if you're a master. So let's see. So, and that was a technical innovation during the Edo period that enabled them to make like 200 prints a day. So it's like a production technology. And okay, so now I'm going to drop a few breadcrumbs. This is kind of how my path to the residency. I grew up in Minneapolis. My parents loved Japanese art. They loved art. They collected a number of prints in the early 70s of this artist whose image is here, Tajima, Hiroyuki Tajima. He was part of the creative print movement. He was like the age of my dad, like he was born in 1911. He was a leading abstract printmaker after World War II. So my parents had about 10 of his prints. I have 2, my other siblings have a couple each. This is not one that I have, but it's kind of representative of what he worked. It's very abstract. So and then so they also had a book that James Michener wrote called The Modern Japanese Print, and I have a reference to that at the end. It's really a good book because he was a collector of prints as well. And then, so I grew up around fabric and makers. My grandmother was a sewer. I learned batik in high school. It's kind of that time, early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, when people were doing a lot of crafts and art and learning things. And so that kind of was happening in my household too. And then, the career and the son and all that. So in 2004, I learned a technique called katazome, which is a Japanese technique of textile decoration. And I went to California and learned from an artist named John Marshall, who had lived in Japan for many years, and he was a specialist in many sort of natural dyeing and fabric decorating techniques from Japan. You may have heard of shibori, and katazome is another thing. So he had big vats of indigo, and he knew a lot. And then I was so enthralled with the technique that when I was making art, I was focused on that, and I did craft fairs and stuff like that. So this is one of my pillows from 2010.
Just beautiful.
Yes, wow.
Thank you. So one of the things about the sort of relationship between katazome and woodblock print is that the materials and the tools are really quite similar. Like the pigments I did, this is more of a painted on technique, so there's brushes involved. And then the rice paste is also used, but it's different purpose. For this, it's done to cover the background like a glue. So it's sort of like printed through a stencil. If you're familiar with screen printing, how some areas are open, some are closed, and then you just squeegee it through. So the paste would dry, and then when it was dry, I would paint those areas with a brush and colors. Okay, and then so in 2010, I took my second workshop from John, and there I was sharing a house with some other people participating. One was a woman named Eva Pietzker. She's a Berlin printmaker, and she had participated and learned this technique at a residency. in the like maybe 2004, around in there, or 2003. So I was really inspired by her work. We traded, this is a print that I traded her. I gave her a piece of my Karazome. And as you can see, I mean, it's another contemporary, it doesn't look anything like that first VOA print.
Mhm.
So minimal color, a lot of contrast, lights and darks. It sort of reminded me of like the lake down where I live near Como Park and the light filtering through. I just thought it was really beautiful. And so then I looked for a class, and I did take a class from Keiji Shinohara, who was in the video, offered through High Point Center for Printmaking in Minneapolis in 2016. So my desire to apply to the residency sort of grew out of these inspirations, my interest in creating imagery from nature, my interest in natural materials and processes, and of course, my desire to visit Japan, which I had never done. So here we are. This is the building, the residency. It's called the Mi Lab. People who go there call it the Mi Lab, but it means Mokuhanga, which means wood print innovation lab. It's located in Fuji Kawaguchiko, near Mount Fuji. And this is a quote from the website. MiLab encourages participating artists to broaden their professional skills and to engage in networking with the aim of encouraging the mutual development of printmakers throughout the world. So they're very much focused on sharing their rich artistic and cultural traditions, and they don't have any hesitancy. They really want to get it out there. And they hope that artists will teach when they get to their home countries. So cultural exchange and the growth of innovation and printmaking throughout the world is a really strong part of their mission. So this is a group photo of the 6. To get there, you apply through an online form, and then they invite you. You kind of write a statement about why you want to go there, what's your artistic experience, and that kind of thing. So 6 artists from around the world are invited to participate. And every year they have like a few sessions of basic training. That's what I did. And then they have some intermediate sessions and some advanced sessions. So I did the basic, and we had Vincent from France, Isabel from Spain, our sensei, Chihiro Taki, she was our teacher, me, Nelida from Spain, Amy from Washington State, and then Arij Abdi from the UK. And this behind, they're standing in our studio, which was on the 2nd floor of the building. And you can see there is a space heater. They didn't have central heat, so it got kind of cool in November. And our host would make sure that the kerosene was in there, and he, turn it on for us in the morning to warm it up. So it was a 5-week residency, and the first week was instruction. And what you see here is our instructor's workstation. You may remember that in the beginning, the video, he talked about how important water was. So the technique evolved in Japan, which has a very, very humid climate. So water readily available, wood, paper, they had access to everything. So this is the damp pack where the paper is. This is a wood block, which is sitting on a damp towel. She had dampened the block ahead of time, and she had shown us various ways, the basic technique of printing here. And these are various types of the baron, the disc for the printing, and brushes and watercolor. So then during the residency, we were free to work in the studio from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Set your own schedule with a break for lunch and a break for dinner. And then the instructors came back a couple weeks in, and she brought 2 visiting instructors who also showed really contemporary ways of working with this medium. So it's very accessible to Western artists, even though it takes a really long time to master. It's still accessible. It doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of space. And then, you can innovate and use it in combinations with other techniques as well. So people have really been receptive to it. Artists want to do it, because it's kind of earth friendly and non-toxic. There aren't solvents, there aren't a lot of problems with stuff like that, and it's accessible. So let's see what else. Okay, here's a close-up on some tools. So they taught us about the tools. These are the brushes used. These are small brushes, and then the larger sort of shoe, they look like shoe brushes. You saw those in the video in the beginning. And then here's some example, a couple kinds of barons. So it's wrapped in a banana leaf or banana fiber sheath. And underneath is a coiled fiber with like knots in it. So the two kinds, one is better for getting like a flat tone, larger area, and one is better for getting those line blocks. So it might have smaller knots. And then these are all the different chisels. You've got knives and U gouges and V gouges and chisels. And they gave each student a set of tools and some brushes that we could take home with us. Let's see. Okay. So then, as you can imagine, there are deep traditions in tool making, knife sharpening, making barons, making brushes. The studio we shared, we had an area to share a lot of tools and materials here. They provided, again, blocks, carving tools, brushes, and paper.
Was everyone in the residency coming in with some print background or extensive print background, or were there people who were coming in that were sort of starting from, you had done some print work already, you said?
Yeah, I had taken a couple classes, plus I think my Katazoma experience helped a lot because I kind of understood some of the, it's really process heavy, and I've always kind of been drawn to that. And the materials, so I had some familiarity with the materials. Some of the artists had taken some print making. All of them had, some of them were professional, mostly working on art, but most of them didn't work on art full time, but had quite a bit of experience either in painting or drawing, or I'm trying to think. One was she was working on her PhD in art, but she was doing like art education for older people. That was her job. It was really interesting that one of the women from Spain. And Vincent, the man from France, had been a children's book illustrator, had done lots of books, like nonfiction books for children. And he was really good at like what you call like on the spot urban sketching. He was so good at that. And so he would go around the town and do like a sketch, and then he transferred that and made
A block
prints from that.
and then do the.
Yeah, so he did some really cool stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And then this is the view. This is just amazing. We had a balcony outside that studio, and that's the view. We had beautiful weather. This is my station on the right. So most days are beautiful. Weekdays, I said we worked independently. Yeah, and the weekends we were responsible for cleaning the house. They had a list of chores I had to get done, and we had to figure out how to do them. So collaboration, stuff like that. And that's not so, it sort of references the way Japanese, if you're an apprentice to a technique, like the printmaker you saw at the beginning, he told stories about when he first got to apprentice with this master. He had to clean and sweep, and the first thing he printed were these little like mailing labels or some really, maybe an advertisement or something. So we did the cleaning on the weekend, and then we were free to go around and look at the town and explore the area. One day we had a visitor, a young woman from the neighborhood came and brought her trained hawk. So we took a break in the middle of the day and chatted with her. That was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah. And then one of the weekends, there was a local festival in this little cultural center, just a walking distance from the residency. And there was a tea ceremony in there, and the local people exhibited their crafts. And then outside there was this wonderful station serving this great noodle soup. So if you're familiar with udon noodles or Japanese food, so they're kind of like the flat, long noodle, and then a special broth, which I guess is special for this area, and toppings. It's just delicious. And I really love these jackets these men wore.
Mm.
And I think the symbol is a symbol that's from that specific region. They, will have these regional designs
Mhm.
everywhere. So that was really, really fun. And then, okay, I'm going to go through now a little bit of the process. And this is not a print I made there. This is a print I made like a year ago, but I'll just go through it because I had the photos of this. So first you design, make a design. This is just, I'm going to work on a print, or I worked on a print of this. This is my sister's in the garden. This is my other sister. And so you design it. This is just the line work, and then you have to figure out what's the color areas, and then you trace those onto a block, onto a separate block for each color, and you carve and you test print, and then you, at the residency, we were told we had to make an addition, and for beginner, it's like 3 to 4 prints that are, as close as you can get to being identical as a beginner. It's not easy. So after you see that, I'm going to show you, I wonder if I'm going to jump off yet. I'm going to show you this first. Maybe I'll show, I'm going to jump to this other, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share another window, and then I'll jump back. I'll be right here. Okay. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is just going to go through really quickly the layers I went through on that print for printing. So that's the first layer. Second layer is just this area down here. A third, fourth, background, second background, third background, fourth background, fifth background. So in this case, the carved out area is the plant, and printed as the background. So that's the white of the paper is what you see as white here. And then that was her shoes, and then I put the line block on last.
Wow.
So,
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
so that too. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I guess. So I'm going to go back to my slides, and then you'll be able to see this again. So thinking about what I just showed you, this is the first block with the body shot of some of the skin tones, and then the foreground. And these are, can you see my cursor? This is one of the Kento marks where the, where the paper is aligned, and here's the other one. So when I print this, it would have been rotated 90 degrees clockwise. And then here are 2 other areas of printing. And in this case, I printed this one first. I'm not sure which I printed for. Yeah, 5, 6. I numbered them. And then you can use all the space in the block. So I printed, then I rotated it the other way and printed this other layer. So it means that you're not wasting. If there's room, you can do more than one color on one block surface. And you can also work on the back. So I use both the front and the back of the block. There's a trench around the carved areas, so you don't get ink on those areas. Front and back usable, and you can do more than one color per side of the block. And so this is kind of this is the watercolor pigment before I mix it with water for this color. And then this is the print I was working on up there at the residency. I would have printed the yellow and the brown, then the green, then this layer of the bird. So, and the only thing missing in this picture is the rice paste. I don't know if you remember in the video when he took his stick, that was rice paste, and that goes on the block along with pigment, and then you rub it in together, and the rice paste sort of evens out the tone.
It was the white substance, the second substance you put on. Yeah, I was curious about
and
that.
it's just glue. It's just rice paste, and it's sort of, you can do it without that, but not you, I mean, in certain situations you would use it or not use it, but we were taught to use it. And what you're going for, you can see this texture here is kind of not even. So what we were trying to learn was how to print a really even flat tone. So as a beginner, I didn't really get that, but I mean, I didn't achieve it, but with practice and the more times you print even on a certain block, it kind of conditions it and it gets easier to do.
Mhm.
And then we were also, we went to Tokyo one weekend and we went to some businesses that were family owned or small businesses that had been making, for example, brushes. We went to a brush shop. It's family owned. This is the mother, this is the daughter, been in the family for generations. They make every kind of brush known to man, and including art brushes for woodblock print, and probably other forms of art. But so here we are looking at brushes. These are those printing brushes. There's the ones with the handle. We were encouraged to support these businesses. We also went to a sharpening stone business, and they had knives there too, but they did a demo of sharpening a knife, and so everyone bought a little sharpening stone because you got to keep your tools really sharp. So that was fantastic. Okay, this is one of the first print I worked on at the residency. And after I came home, I made a second edition so I could improve on what I had done. So this is from the second edition. So John, you asked earlier about signing. This is how they taught us to sign, 3 of 13, second edition. This is the title in quotes and then signature. So that's kind of the traditional way to do it. And then this is the second one I worked on. And you saw that one block with the green. Again, I printed it back home as well, again, so I could work on getting a better flat tone. So that is about it. I can open it to questions.
Can you go back a slide? I'm taking
Yeah.
with
Just love this.
that yellow beak. It's like it has to be lined up so perfectly.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
It does. Okay, and that is the technological innovation of the Kento marks.
Of the marks. Mhm.
But this is a different block, but there's one on the right side. So I'm right-handed and it's on the right. If I were left-handed, it would be the opposite. And then this other one is, 2/3 of the way over, you put another flat one.
Sure.
So then when you're laying the paper down, you drop it in there and then you kind of let it go into there. So, and the other thing about that is when you're transferring the design, so the original drawing with all the different lines and shapes will also have those Kento marks. So what we did was we traced it on with carbon paper, just standard office carbon paper. We'd kind of tape it on our block,
Mhm.
securely slip the carbon paper under there, trace it with a ballpoint pen, in a ruler. And then when you're ready to carve each block, you have to do those Kento marks, and there's a special flat chisel that so the accuracy is also due to how accurately you carve those marks in there,
Sure.
and how accurately you put the paper down.
I was going to ask, what kind of guideposts? How do you do that with fabric? So that pillow you showed, I would think fabric would be moving around. I mean, that totally flat would be hard.
Right. So that's a really good question. So the printing, that Katazome color is all done in one layer. So you don't have an issue with registration. So that pillow, the only part that's kind of printed is there's a stencil that I made out of paper. I should have brought one of those. So that would get put down on the fabric, and then with one like squeegee, you put rice paste through there. So what you're doing is you're kind of printing over what you don't want colored. So it's the opposite.
Yeah.
And then that dries, and then you take a brush and you brush on the color. And you have to do it like in 3 layers. So it dries, then you do some more, and it dries, and you do some more. So you can build up tone and and different color.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not the same, whereas this you're carving out, you're inking what you want, and then you're printing.
Hmm.
So the thing with Katazome is you can't really do, I tried to do pictures with multiple layers,
Mhm.
but it's not that direct, and it's hard to do multiples that look similar. I mean, identical, but you can do multiples that look similar when you're just doing one layer. Like the pillow, I could do that over and over,
Right,
even though it's hand painted each one.
right.
Okay. So anyway, any other, I mean, we can,
Can you walk us through your references? Just tell us about.
oh, sure. So the first one is the video that you saw. This is just a YouTube link available at the Smithsonian site. These are books. This is a really good book on Japanese woodblock printing. She goes through a lot of the history, the process. Same with this one. This was written, Rebecca Salter's book was written earlier. I guess I didn't bring those. And April Vollmer, this book just came out a few years ago, 2015. Well, a few years ago.
Mhm.
That's also really great. And it has many examples of contemporary artists using this technique. And then this is the book my parents bought. It's out of print, but you can still find it here and there. Richner, James A., The Modern Japanese Print. So he collected a number of prints, and it was sort of a folio where there was a nice print of the print he owned, pasted on the page. And then I had that book, but I don't know what I did. And then he would describe it and tell about what the artist said about their print. So that's pretty cool. This is the teacher I learned Katazome from. This is Eva Pietzger, the one German artist who's got a really great website. And this is the MeLab site itself. So if you know anyone who wants to apply to the residency, that's where you would go. And then that's just my website there. This is just a Tokyo street with a cat.
Could you, on your website, are there other examples of some of your artwork? Could you show us some more things that you've done?
Sure, I could do that. Let's see. Let me just, first I'm gonna go.
Does anyone else have questions? Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, John. Nice to see you.
How are you? Nice to see you too.
Yes. I was a kid. Your art is beautiful. I was wondering where you got your inspiration. That last piece, the bird and the nest.
So beautiful.
I know.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. I get my inspiration from nature. Could be anything. That bird was, the robin is my favorite bird. And it has a kind of a family connection. My mother loved robins. She used to feed them raisins on her back deck. She'd put like a railing. And so eventually they would come and do that. So like in 2014 to 2016, I had a robin visiting, or we did, at our house, and it built a nest under the eaves of our back porch, like 3 years in a row, and we got to watch them. And I also got them to get raisins. And once in a while, this robin would just hop up our back step, look in the window of the door, and then they just sort of fly a short distance away, and I'd toss raisins out, and they would. So that was kind of the inspiration for that, and the memory of my mother, who passed away in 2009. So.
Nice. Would you take a photograph and work from a photo, or was it just?
That was basically my imagination. So, and then I have another piece. Let me just go to my website here. Can I just go new share, or should I stop share?
Stop sharing this one and then do a new share. Yep.
And then new share. I don't always work in, can you see this?
Yeah.
I don't always work in printmaking. Now, like last summer, I started to do these drawings of flowers. So these are flowers, and I actually have a show of these now that is up at a gallery over by, it's called the Carondelet Center. It's near St. Kate's, not at St. Kate's. But so these are some of those.
Right.
And those are drawings with, so it's sort of mixed media. The background was done first, and then I did color pencil and gouache on top of that. So
Beautiful.
those are done from life, the flower is done from life. The background's a sort of intuitive color.
Mm. Wow, what size is that kit?
They're about 6 by 22.
Mm.
6 by 22, so tall.
Mhm.
Yep.
And is it on fabric or is it on
No, these are paper. These are on paper.
beautiful?
Yeah, and then so woodblock prints. There's the one of my sister.
Mm.
There's one I did of a hydrangea
Mhm.
for a print exchange last year. There's that one, this one. Okay, this one you were asking about inspiration. So John has a version of this in a textile, but I've always loved this image. So, but I was walking down along the lake path one day, and I just looked up, and the moon was up there, and there were a bunch of grackles on a old dead tree. So I took a picture, and then I sort of went from there. But
Nice.
so there's also I have a favorite tree that's a black willow. These leaves are supposed to be black willow leaves. And then I changed the tree to the dogwood, the red twig, so that's where that came from.
So nice.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then there's textiles too, so you can look through katazome. This is all katazome. So I was trying to do flat, hangings with multiple layers, and that's where I found kind of frustration. It's like, oh, this should really be a print, because it was so frustrating to do this, because you can't really see what you've got till you wash out all the rice paste.
Mm.
If any of you have done batik or know about that, batik is beeswax. It's also a resist.
Mhm.
So rice paste is also a resist. So
Mhm.
you don't know what you've got till you take it off, till you rinse it out.
Kid, I was kind of chuckling to myself because your studio in Japan was so nice and neat and clean. And then you spent a little bit of time talking about how the cleaning you had to do on the weekend. I took a pottery class down the road here, and oh my God, our studio is like so the opposite of what you showed us in Japan. I mean, like the tables had stains on them, and
Yeah.
the floor needed washing, and the shelves weren't all nice and neat. That was amazing.
Well, the thing is, I did not include, and I just really didn't take that many pictures of all of us at work because we were so busy, but you should have seen it. I mean, like wood chips all over the floor, paper all over the floor. I mean, it was a mess.
Oh, it was.
So,
Okay.
I took those pictures like in the morning or, before anybody got up there.
It cleaned up well.
So yeah, it's kind of fun.
Thank you. Hi, Jane. Welcome back. Oh, how beautiful he is. She is.
I stopped driving
Oh, good.
so I can turn on my video.
Color is so.
So this is a version of that other one I did as a textile
Right.
a number of years before. So I've always kind of wanted to do it as a print. Anyway, that quilt is hanging behind.
Oh, wow. It's a quilt.
Yeah, it's like a baby size quilt,
Hmm.
but I don't have any grandchildren yet. So anyway,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Rabbits eating the kale. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you. Any other questions for Kit? Kit, thanks so much. This has
You're
been great.
welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Mhm.
Kit, we as part of Rotary, we end each of our meetings with something called the Rotary four-way test. This was developed over 100 years ago and is sort of the cornerstone of Rotary. So we usually take ourselves off of mute and over Zoom try to say it as a group, which is always kind of humorous. So the Rotary four-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it
But
build
build goodwill.
goodwill and better
better
friendships?
friendships,
And will
Will
it
it be beneficial
beneficial
to all
concerned?
That's really great.
Thank you. And just thanks so much. We'd love to have you back anytime. We have weekly meetings, the same time. The link's always the same. We have a variety of interesting speakers, and thanks for enlightening us a bit about Japan and printmaking and culture and how you've really embraced it and how you brought it back here to Minnesota and how it impacts your life. It's just really, it's very inspirational. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Bye, Kit.
Bye, Kit. Thank you.
Thanks.